Today we start off with some stories that remind us why hope still matters. From a carpenter who rebuilt Notre Dame and became the first to marry inside it, to a farmer gifting a 1,400-pound pumpkin to a pumpkin-loving polar bear. A shelter dog reunited with its childhood owner. A mother welcoming a miracle baby after 20 years. Millie Bobby Brown turning her farm into a rescue haven. And of course, Aloka, the peace dog. If 2025 is any sign kindness is alive and well around the world, let's hope 2026 will bring on more of that. Welcome to Kaleidoscope. I'm Savithri, Rodrigo. From the Kaleidoscope studios, BileshaWeeraratne, NOSTOS, and News in a Blink with the week's news that was. NOSTOS, curated by Dominic Sanzoni, brought together 9 Sri Lankan artists across generations, journeys that have stretched across villages, cities and continents, yet always return home. These works speak in layered colour and mixed media, village rhythms rendered in textured earth tones, political undercurrents hinted through fractured forms, landscapes that feel both intimate and unsettled, and nature painted with reverence and restraint. There's abstraction that resists easy answers, figuration rooted in lived history, and surfaces that carry time itself. Each canvas is a story of departure and return. This is how Sri Lankan identity continues to evolve, without ever forgetting where it began. Stay connected with Kaleidoscope across YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And Kaleidoscope is proudly supported by SriLanka Life, CDB, and The Daily Morning. Thanks for being with us.
Introducing CDB Self, the digital wallet that makes life easy.
All the news that matters in a flash. This is CDB News in a Blink. The Sri Lankan government doubles projected income from vehicle imports to 904 billion rupees in 2025, with EVs making up 10% of all imports. Sri Lanka exceeds its 2025 renewable energy addition target, securing agreements to surpass 2026 to 2029 targets. A quick pulse check on this week's markets, stocks, oil and gold. Amidst volatile world markets, the all-share price index at the Colombo Stock Exchange reached an all-time high of 23,750 points. Oil prices slipped below $60 a barrel as rising US crude inventories outweigh output halts in Kazakhstan and geopolitical pressure from US tariff threats. Gold nears $4,900 per ounce as trade tensions push investors towards safe havens. Port City Colombo gets $300 million in FDIs for Phase 2. Sri Lanka unveils a 2.5 billion rupee plan to make the Beira Lake safer for water sports and swimming. According to the SLBFE, a majority of Sri Lanka's migrant housemates are now over 50. We chat more about migrant women later in the show. Italian fashion designer Valentino Garavani dies at 93. A rare purple star sapphire is found in Sri Lanka, probably the biggest at a whopping 3,563 carats.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. SriLanka Life.
Behind every remittance is a woman whose labour often comes at a hidden cost. A new study by the Institute of Policy Studies Sri Lanka shows that abuse faced by migrant female domestic workers is not isolated, but a continuum that escalates over time. Drawing on 42 complaint files from 2024, it highlights how sexual violence is linked to food denial, sleep deprivation, unpaid wages, and restricted communication. Of the 7,448 complaints to the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment last year, over three-quarters were from female domestic workers, mainly in the Middle East. Research Fellow and Head of Migration and Urbanization Policy Research of the Institute of Policy Studies Sri Lanka and lead author of the study, Dr. BileshaWeeraratne, joins me on Kaleidoscope Dialogues this week. Now, your recent study shows us this violence that female migrant domestic workers face is not just a single act, it just has grown over time. At what point does the system actually fail these women?
In my opinion, I think the weak labour laws in the countries of destination, mainly in the Middle Eastern countries, is where it all starts to escalate into violence or problems for women. And as you said, these are all interconnected. Sometimes a small act of not having the sufficient amount of rest can trigger into poor working quality, and then that starts with verbal abuse that can escalate into physical abuse and sexual violence.
Has economic desperation effectively become a silent tool for SGBV?
Definitely, Savi. We studied 42 cases. All of them were reluctant to report the abuse in the first instance because they were fearing that they might lose the job, they might not have that flow of remittances to support the family back at home. And also, after reporting also, when they were given possible solutions, whether they want to take up the same job in the same place or to be repatriated, most often they wanted to take up the job because they wanted to have that income flow coming and they couldn't finance the repatriation costs. So it is very much tied to the remittances.
What shocked you most when you looked at these?
What shocked me most was that all of these instances have been previously reported, and it had to be reported again to the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment. And what shows was that if it was reported right on time, it could have been prevented. It shouldn't have been a investigative case. It would have been prevented before things got escalated, and the woman didn't have to become a survivor to report this case. So that was the shocking part for me.
So Sri Lanka is a signatory to various international conventions, but despite all this, sexual gender-based violence just persists. So where exactly is this system breaking down?
We have to understand labour migration is between two countries. Sri Lankan women are going to the Middle East for foreign employment, and the Middle East region is a place where there is very weak labour laws. Some of these conventions have been ratified, but their implementation is poor, and in most countries they have their own versions of labour laws. And the combination of these weak labour laws and the informality of the domestic work sector, because the woman is employed in a household, and the Middle Eastern labour laws will not be very conducive for labour inspectors to come and investigate or inspect a household as a place of employment. Then the implementation of labour laws become very weak, and then also the cultural factors in the Middle East countries where women have a very lower place in the society compared to men. These all act together and compound in affecting women.
Sexual violence is just one aspect of all this. There's food deprivation, sleep denial, there's wage theft. Why are these still not recognized as violence?
Any act of physical, psychological or sexual harm that is inflicted on a woman or a man or a boy or a girl based on gender will be considered as a gender-based or sexual or gender-based violence. So let me take you through an example. Let's say food deprivation. A woman is entitled to cook and she's expected to cook when she's a domestic worker. But the cultural factor in most of these Middle Eastern countries is that women have to eat last. And that because you're a woman, you are deprived of having the food in parallel time to the male workers. So this can trigger and start a effective sexual and gender-based violence component when, because you're a woman, the simple act of food deprivation becomes a sexual and gender-based violence.
In a worst case scenario, if nothing changes, what is the next decade going to look like for our women migrant workers?
The sexual and gender-based violence will unfortunately continue, and there is a tendency that women to normalize this and consider that this is part of the risk profile that they have to experience when going abroad. That should not be the case, but if we don't take action, they will think that this is part of the risk that they have to face.
And that's a wrap. We will see you next week with the best and the latest.